Welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we're going to try to figure out what happened yesterday. So South Carolina escapes week one with a 23-19 win. Both of their touchdowns come directly off of turnovers that the defense forced within Old Dominion's on 10-yard line. So needless to say, not the best offensive performance, but there's something to be said for escaping week one 1-0, which I'm sure the team in the upstate would have liked to do. Probably would have liked to have a warm-up to work out some of their kinks as well. But I guess the question...
Yeah, South Carolina would have beat Georgia yesterday, just to go ahead and get out in front of that.
No, yeah, probably would have been even worse than what Clemson lost by. But let's start to break down what happened a little bit last night. So game started about as good as you possibly could have hoped. You get a strip sack fumble on the second play from scrimmage. Yep. Falls directly into Debo Williams' arms. You get the ball on the 3, and a couple plays later, Rocket Sanders punches it in, gets his first Gamecock touchdown. And you kind of think, okay, like this is going to go pretty smoothly. Then what happened, Alan?
First of all, what happened immediately after that, is your two safeties, your junior safeties that you feel pretty good about, get split. Isaiah Page for Old Dominion goes 72 yards to the end zone. That touchdown's immediately answered back by an Old Dominion touchdown. And then it becomes a slog. The offense kind of speaks for itself, but I'll go ahead and read some numbers anyway because I have them up. 288 total yards. That by itself is not great. 3.6 yards per play. Lenore Sellers 10 for 23, 114 passing yards, 68 yards in the ground, 22 attempts. Rocket 24 attempts, 88 yards. And the one that got me is that nobody caught more than 2 passes. Vandervius Jacobs led the team with 2 catches for 59 yards. You let Old Dominion hang around as a 21-point favorite because you couldn't really move the ball, is what happened.
Yeah, and I do want to get into who might be to blame for that, I guess. I think that there are several possible parties. Obviously, Lenore Sellers probably did not have the debut that he wanted. I've gone back and watched a little bit of it even after the game to try to wrap my head around it a little bit. I don't think you lay it all at his feet, but there's pretty much no question that he came out a little juiced up. A couple bad things happened early, rattled him a bit, and it seemed like he couldn't get out of his own way. I will say after the lightning delay and halftime, he seemed at least a little bit more settled and comfortable. That didn't necessarily translate to an exceptional performance on the field or whatever, but the first quarter and a half, he looked like it was his first start ever.
Yeah, I'm thinking every throw felt like it was 100 miles an hour. That's kind of what the takeaway I had watching from where I was. I'm thinking of one to Nick Harbor that was sailed. I'm thinking of another one on the run where he just kind of had a guy and it was over his head.
He almost got Vandrevius Jacobs killed across the middle with another high one. Yeah.
The last play before the lightning delay was him knocking down his own running back, Eugene McDowell, trying to throw a block. I think you said it before we got on here. He's trying to do a little bit too much, which is understandable and also does bring up another point. Not all his fault because there were, I got to go back and, look at it, recount, but a handful, like probably more than half of those were design runs. There's a lot of, especially in the first quarter. I feel like there were 5 or 6 in the first quarter, but you can't run your quarterback 22 times in a game. That's just not going to work over the course of a 12-game season.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate the run scheme as far as having him as a threat as an actual zone read, which you obviously did not really have with Rattler last year. I mean, he would take it every now and then, but Sellers has the ability to legitimately break one for 50 yards or whatever if it plays out right. But to me, the reason that that number is 22 rushes is he was doing a lot of what we saw like early in Connor Shaw's career, early in a lot of mobile quarterbacks' career, which is once they don't have their first read, instead of going on to their second, third read, whatever, they tend to just like pull down and take off running, probably because that worked for them pretty well against high school competition. Um, but that's not really going to be a sustainable strategy going forward. I mean, there's certainly some times where it's 3rd and 4 or whatever, and you go scramble for 5 yards and keep a drive going. But I think more times than not, Sellers had a little bit more time to kind of keep his eyes downfield, especially once he got out of the pocket. And he was kind of immediately looking to run instead.
Yeah, for sure. I I will say though, it's how many of those plays were. I mean, you have to go back and look. Were there a second option? Was there a third option? Was a play developing long enough? That's the other thing we haven't brought up yet. Is that maybe it wasn't as like morbid as what you saw in week 1 last year with 9 sacks, but South Carolina's offensive line struggled again yesterday. The one that really sticks out in my head is you get the ball at halftime. You've got a really good drive going, like 6 or 7 minutes. You set up 1st and goal, and then it's 3 straight plays with a missed assignment up front, 2 busted runs, and then an untouched blitzer on 3rd down, bring Sellers down, kick a field goal in the red zone. Again, stating the obvious, and it didn't stay completely that bad last year, but offensive line needs to be better than it was yesterday.
Yeah, and you say it wasn't as bad as last year, but is giving up 4 sacks to a mid-tier Sun Belt program that only had 19 total sacks last season as bad as giving up 9 sacks to UNC? I don't know. It's probably not too much better. Again, how much of that is on Lenore Sellers holding it a little bit? How much of that is on the offensive line play the scheme? There are definitely some times where Old Dominion blitzed or just did a simple twist up front. My voice is going out. Wow. Did a simple twist up front, and it seemed like the offensive line had no idea what to do in that scenario, like from a mental standpoint. Some of it was physical, but I think you feel pretty good about the physical talent up front this year. But there were just a lot of missed assignments yesterday, it seemed like to me.
Yeah, I think that some of that's young players. You got a true freshman at left tackle and a guy who's a junior or a redshirt sophomore in his 3rd year at right tackle, but hasn't really played much. That's if you want to spin a positive light on this. That's kind of, we got a comment here from Palmetto Flora Gallery saying no creativity in the play calling to get guys the ball. Yeah, so we didn't want to bring that up. Actually, we have that on our little show sheet. I was thinking about 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter. Is there going to be a screen pass anywhere? Can you just try to mitigate this line stuff a little bit? Can you get someone the ball in space? We appreciate the comment. I know Jared Brown got a little bit banged up. Beamer said it's not long term, but he did miss the last quarter and change. That's one of your screen weapons. Maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. I feel like a screen to Juju McDowell would have done a world of good at some point early in that 4th quarter.
Yeah, and really just using him as a weapon a little bit more. I mean, the little bit that we saw him, he looked explosive. He had 2 rushes for 16 yards, so definitely one of the better averages on the day. And he showed even in the kick return game, I thought, except for one, that maybe he probably shouldn't have taken out of the end zone. A little bit of wiggle in space too. So I do think you got to find ways to get Juju McDowell in space. He's one of your playmakers on a team that you're not quite sure who those explosive guys are yet. Yeah, so Palmetto Flooring Gallery brought up a good point on the creativity and play calling, and that was kind of a big question I had coming out of this. Is last season I think we gave Dowell Loggins pretty much a pass because it felt like the offense was as functional as possible given how depleted the offensive line was from pretty much the first snap last season. I think there are still plenty of questions along the offensive line. But at what point do we start to point a little bit of the finger, I guess, at Dowell Loggins for these offensive struggles? Are you still giving him a pass, or do you think that there were times that maybe he didn't put his redshirt freshman quarterback starting his very first game in the best position here?
Yeah, I'm not giving him a pass for yesterday. Personally, I thought that was not. Again, you're talking about putting yourself in position to win, putting yourself in position to do the right things. That wasn't necessarily conducive to that. Like I said, I don't think you utilized the short passing game very well. If you're how many times did we get on here in July and August and say your receiving group's not tall, but you got a lot of 5'10" burners, guys you can make guys miss in space, guys you can make a play if you give them the ball. Just really wasn't any of that. I'm thinking of like Jared Brown took a handoff for 15 yards, kind of some of that Coastal Carolina stuff. I feel like there was another screen like by the home sideline that someone took 10 or 15 yards. I'm blanking right now. Maybe it was on that first drive of the second half. And again, the amount of design runs for Lenoris, it was a little much for me personally. I don't think that's necessarily sustainable just with the amount of hits he's going to take and everything like that. But I get it. C- for Dowell Loggins yesterday.
Yeah,
How would you put it?
I think back to like the opening game script, I think, and it went pretty well. So obviously you're set up in perfect position after that fumble, so you score a quick touchdown. The next drive, if I recall correctly, went pretty well too. You ended up with a field goal at the end of that drive, and you kind of drove the field a little bit on that one, and it was a lot of running. Like you felt like you were seeing all the offseason talk about, being a run
Ground and
first team
pound.
kind of starting to come ground and pound, come to fruition. And I thought it looked good. And then pretty much as what we were chatting after that series on GamecockScoop.com in the live thread, I was like, all right, they probably need to try to get Lenore Sellers warmed up, passing the ball a little bit, because at that point it felt like South Carolina was in pretty good control of the game. And then you come out on the next series, and that's when Lenore Sellers hit the perfect 65-yard in the air pass to Jared Brown, and it bounced off his hands, and there was a penalty, and didn't end up counting for anything. And then you have two straight incompletions after that, and end up having to punt it away, or maybe an incompletion and like a pass behind the sticks or something. I can't remember exactly. And from there, it felt like once you got off script and you were trying to I don't know, play around and create some scenarios for your quarterback, things got a little messy. And then by the time you got back on script, the game was kind of fully in a dogfight, and you're like, oh, we actually might lose this game at this point. And so then you have all the nerves and everything else that kind of kicked in. So I don't know, the script itself just got kind of screwy pretty quick, I thought.
Yeah, and I guess while we're on the subject of play calls, and maybe this is how we transition to the biggest positive of the game, is there was one defensive play call that really sticks with me. It's the 4th and 6 where Old Dominion quarterback Grant Wilson scrambles for 36 yards, scores a touchdown. That cuts it to 3 at the time. You were getting home with 4 rushers, even 3 rushers sometimes, pretty much all day. And that was the time Clayton White decided to send the house. There's nobody spying the quarterback. The Red Sea parts, he pretty much goes on touchdown inside the 10 and scores. That's not related to offense at all, but we're talking about play calling, and that's just one specific call that looked bad in the moment. I think I said in the chat that was bad in the moment. However,
It was
you
a
didn't have
very
to blitz all
aggressive.
day because your D line was awesome.
It was a very aggressive play call, which I didn't hate, but I also was. You got to pick and choose your spots on those aggressive play calls. 3rd and 6, same play call. I feel great about it. On 4th and 6, though, what are you trying to create a turnover? Like, what are you doing? Because if
Yeah,
you stop
exactly.
them, you get the ball right there anyway. So yeah, I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020 there because of what happened on the end result, and they did get pressure. Like the blitz got home, but unfortunately, the pocket collapsed around him, and he had a wide open field right in front of him. All right, yeah, let's get into some positives because we just spent the first 15 minutes of this podcast acting like South Carolina lost the game, which of course they did not. And a big reason that they did not was that the defense, other than those two big plays that we've already kind of mentioned, kind of came to for the offseason narrative that they were going to be much better, that the front seven was going to be able to create pressure, that they were much deeper across the board. All of that sort of came to fruition. And specifically the front seven and Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart were able to create so much pressure that they forced 4 turnovers basically on their own, 2 fumbles from the quarterback and 2 interceptions from the quarterback. I do want to give what was his name, Grant Wilson. I do want to give him some credit though. He got beat up all game and just kind of kept coming back. And really, had put Old Dominion in a chance to win. But also on the flip side, if he doesn't fumble twice in the shadow of his own end zone, perhaps they do win. So I don't know, a little give and take there. But anyway, what do you see on the defensive line? What do you see from Kennard and Stewart? How are you feeling about all that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I took was that, we've heard all offseason about rotation, about depth, about guys. That's real. There were 10 guys in that game before the end of the first quarter. It wasn't like, oh, we trust 4 of these guys, 5 of these guys, we're gonna have to play everybody else. Like, no, they were moving bodies in and out quickly. They were trying to keep everybody fresh. They were doing that. I think you saw that in the fourth quarter with everybody being fresh. Dylan Stewart, it kind of goes without saying, right? He's a 5-star. He came in with the hype. He looked the part. He was the part. He made the biggest play of the game with that forced fumble on Wilson with 6 minutes to go. Kyle Kennard, again, we talked about. I think I had him down as my impact transfer. We did that. He looked the part of a Power 5 transfer who led that team in Georgia Tech and sacks last year. You just talk about like creating matchup problems for an opposing offensive line, having 2 guys like that coming off the edge with what South Carolina has in the middle. Again, 21 sacks all last season. He had 5 before halftime yesterday. I think that kind of says the whole thing right there.
Yeah, for sure. Although maybe Old Dominion made some adjustments. Maybe the humidity got to South Carolina a little bit because the defense did struggle a little bit more in the second half until that Dylan Stewart punch out that kind of ultimately decided the game. Granted, the entire momentum, vibes, whatever you want to call it, in the stadium were pretty dead for most of that second half until that happened too. I remember you saying several times that you could kind of hear a pin drop, and
it was pretty bleak. It was
yeah, I think most people were kind of in disbelief of what they were seeing at that point. So maybe defense in general, especially at home, tends to feed off of a home crowd, and there wasn't much to feed off of there for most of the second half. No, yeah, I was very impressed with the front seven. I was impressed with Demetrius Knight, who I made an impact on the first or second play from scrimmage. Saw him kind of throughout. Him and Ben Martin Scott were rotating out a good bit, and then Debo Williams was pretty much on the field the whole time. And not much to say about him. He has been great and continues to be great. Was the leader. Made some pretty big hits at times, even when Old Dominion was maybe driving a little bit. He was making sure that they knew he was there. And then the secondary stuff, can you really be that upset about a secondary that created 2 interceptions? Yes, I mean that first 75-yard pass or whatever was pretty inexcusable, but for the most part I thought they held up otherwise. And maybe you're going to give up a big play here or there throughout the season, but I think if you have this sort of performance throughout the season and can continue to create pressure and create turnovers, you're going to be fine on defense. But as we led the show with, your offense is going to have to support you a little bit or you're still going to lose a lot of ball games.
Yeah, we hadn't even mentioned O'Donnell Fortune yet. He made one of the biggest plays of the game. Old Dominion, Lenore Sellers fumbles on a keeper. Nick Harbour makes a great tackle, by the way, coming back down the other way. Make sure it's 1st and goal, Old Dominion, not just a touchdown right there.
And that was shades of that DK Metcalf tracking down Buda Baker sort of thing from the NFL. If you've never seen that, you got to look up that play, everyone. But that was really impressive. Nick Harbour saved the touchdown by sprinting 70 yards or whatever and running him down. And it ended up being very impactful.
Just pure straight line track speed there. And then, yeah, the next play from scrimmage, Grant Wilson makes, I thought it was his worst decision of the day for sure, trying to force the ball into traffic with a cornerback right there. O'Donnell Fortune picks it off in the end zone. South Carolina gets a reprieve. You don't even give up a field goal on that drive, which that could have been significant, even 3 points later in the game, obviously. And then Jalen Kilgore at the end of the game, good ball skills. That's the game sealing interception. That ball tips off an Old Dominion receiver, pops up in the air. Kilgore makes the play. Yeah, like I said, that first touchdown was, I mean, the first thing on my mind was the Florida game last year, was just how porous your secondary was in that game. I mean, that's literally just a post route that split your two safeties. That wasn't anything like, complicated Sean
Well,
McVay 1,000-word play call.
to me, that's something that DQ Smith and why is my mind going completely
Nicky
blank?
Manwari.
Nicky Manwari struggled with a little bit at the beginning of the season last year. They both love to come up and help with the run. And at times that's gotten them in trouble where they're staring a little bit too long in the backfield. And then they, are a little flat footed as a wide receiver is streaking between them. I think that's what happened. And it's something that they corrected last year. They're both veterans. I like to think that they'll get that right going forward. But first game and kind of reverted back early on, and really throughout the rest of the game didn't see anything like that again. So
Yeah, is that the biggest, other than the D line and the fact that you won the game? Is that the biggest positive or sign for hope from yesterday, that you just had a lot of self-inflicted wounds that you would like to believe in a week 1 to week 2 jump? I mean, we haven't even mentioned yet, you score a touchdown on a fake field goal. Ty Kroger looks like Cam Newton in the backfield, makes a defender miss, throws a touchdown to Brady Hunt. And then I think it was Torricelli Simpkins who was too far downfield, gets called for a penalty.
yeah, and even
Josiah
that
Thompson with a
even
false
that
start on
replay looked a little bit ticky tacky to me on the penalty, but whatever. They called the penalty, get a touchdown taken off. Sorry, go ahead.
You're saying, like you already mentioned, there was the play where Jared Brown drops a deep ball and you have the illegal man downfield. Josiah Thompson with a false start on a 4th and 3 that kind of takes away a chance to go for that.
Lenore
You
Sellers
already
knocks
mentioned,
down Juju McDowell, who might have
yep,
scored on that play.
yep. You already mentioned, your two safeties get split on a play pretty early in the game. You had a lot of, and Beamer said it yesterday post game, a lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of beating yourself yesterday. Can that be correct? I mean, not all of it. You're going to make mistakes in a football game, but is that correctable-ish going to week 2?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the caveat that you didn't want to be coming out of this game talking about beating yourself and all these like tiny moments where the ball flipped this way or that, because obviously you won the game on some of those small moments as well. We already mentioned the Nick Harbor thing. DeAndre Jules blocks an extra point,
Yeah,
and
that was
uh,
huge. Yeah.
yeah, that forces Old Dominion to be pushing a little bit on that last drive, which leads to the interception. So anyway, it went both ways, is what I guess my point is. But if we are talking about the self-inflicted moments, especially in the first half, I do think they made a big impact. If you score on a couple more of those drives early, I think one, you give Sellers a lot more confidence, and two, just literally the scoreboard looks a lot different, and maybe the momentum in the building kind of shifts, and the game goes differently. Um, Speaking of Lenora Sellers' confidence, were you surprised at all that as much as he was struggling? I mean, you mentioned he completed 43% of his passes, ended up with an 85.1 QBR for the game. Didn't throw an interception, so that's good. Did have a fumble. And just knocked down Juju McDowell. Just some like weird stuff kind of was going on. Were you surprised that they didn't pull him for Robbie Ashford or some other option in that game? And do you think that there's any sort of controversy that could be brewing, or is this Lenore Sellers football team still?
No, that never crossed my mind, honestly. I know it's worth bringing up. Sellers struggled a lot, especially on, if you're running the ball 22 times with their quarterback. Okay, Robbie Ashford is also running quarterback. You could have mixed him in there. Maybe you don't want that on tape in week 1. You want to save that for later. Okay. But no, I mean, I don't know what Robbie Ashford changes yesterday, other than maybe a little bit of a calmer presence back there. But I think the problems yesterday were, I mean, Lenore struggled yesterday, but I think the problems were, your offensive line, all the things you've already hit on, really. Not having the play calling a little bit, and no, it never crossed my mind. Did it cross your mind?
It
Clearly, it
didn't
did.
cross. It didn't cross my mind. I was texting my dad, and he's lifelong Gamecock fan, and he was like, "You got to put someone else in there." And I was like, "Yeah, but like if you pull your redshirt freshman
Yeah.
quarterback in his first start, then you're going to destroy his confidence." And his argument was, "Well, if you lose this game, the season's over anyway." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, there is some truth to that, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good that they didn't pull him and that they still end up with the win, because." Then you allow a little bit of a fresh reset. I think in the scenario where you pull them and then you win, you're going to have a crisis of confidence sort of issue there. Or if you ultimately end up losing that game, that's obviously a tough thing to bounce back from. I On that note, I don't think that Sellers is as bad as his stat line looked. I think that he showed a lot of the things that have people excited. The ability to create with his feet, the howitzer for our arm that he has, although maybe he needs to take a little off of it on some of the intermediate throws. Um, it just did not go smoothly for him. And I think that he has some better days still ahead for him that will get people a little more excited again. But let's put it up as a pink flag that maybe we were a little too uh, over generous with how prepared he was for the season, maybe.
Yeah, that's all you can really say is just a little bit overzealous, first game jitters, whatever. And you hope that it's calmer next week, but you're also going on the road next week. So I don't know if you can
Before
really
we
say that's going to happen either.
Yeah, before we get into that, I did want to mention a couple Instagram comments. They don't show up on our side, but I can see them over here. The Real Brown Bomber said, "Bro, where are the quick passes over the middle for
Yep.
guys like Harbor?" And then Golf Cat 83 says, "Logan's offense is so boring, no motion and creativity. I get the QB options, but you have a full season. That's why you have Rocket Sanders at running back. You randomly just throw deep with no flow or feel." And that's getting into a little bit of the weirdness of the game script and how it kind of got off, like I mentioned earlier. I will say, I guess, positive for Nick Harbor, other than the him running the guy down on the fumble return. He had a pretty nifty catch on the sideline that his foot was just out of bounds on, but it was a nice grab.
The hands were there. It's
Um,
been the question with him.
Exactly. And then he was wide open for another pass that would have been a first down, and Sellers just sailed it over his head, which that tells you how juiced up he was that he can overthrow a 6'5" guy. But I don't know. It was good to see, I guess, Nick Harbor be involved. Hands were there, like you said, which was something that we had heard were a little concerned about or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I in a wide receiver room that we still aren't sure who the alpha is. I don't think that Harbor should be ruled out, and I think that that's a good thing for the
Yeah.
sophomore that's got blazing fast speed.
Yeah, we didn't really get any clarity yesterday at wide receiver, I thought, at all, other than you kind of know guys who are going to play. Mazio
Mazio
Bennett
Bennett
played a
did
lot
some, yeah,
yesterday.
nice jinx. Yeah, Mazio Bennett made some good plays, is what I was going to say. So, it's hard to parse who your weapons are when you only complete 10 passes. But hopefully, in a better output later this season, that'll start to become a little clearer. And yeah, I mean, I don't feel terrible about the wide receiver room. I just certainly don't really place the lack of a passing game on the wide receiver room after the first game, at least.
Yep, I agree with that. I'm just thinking like you didn't I didn't maybe this is another dialogue at this point too. There was not a ton to the tight ends, just designed wise. Like I'm talking like whether that's in the red zone, some of the fade route stuff we talked about on the show last week, whether that's some of the short passes, the safety net, the big body runs 5 yards, falls forward, and just keeps the drive moving stuff. They did that with Michael Smith once on kind of a rollout that I can think of, but like Joshua Simon, 1 catch yesterday. Michael Smith, 2 catches yesterday. I guess Brady Hunt had the touchdown that was off the board. But Brady Hunt also had a drop, a wide open one in space that would have extended the drive. You would have probably liked to see more from the tight ends, especially after the optimism around them, I think, from in the building.
Yeah, One other offensive note that we haven't talked about is Rocket Sanders. I thought he looked good.
Yeah.
He didn't have a ton of space to work with most of the time. When he did, I thought he took advantage. I thought he was often getting hit in the backfield and still creating a little bit. But yeah, you're going to have to find ways to get him a little bit more space in the run game. But as far as just like the talent on the field, he looked like Rocket Sanders to me.
Yeah, that was the whole thing, right? Is he healthy? Could he bounce back up from getting hit? Can he take 20 plus carries in a game? We have another comment here saying Loggins is terrible. The NFL was done with him. No rhythm, can't call a game. We appreciate the comment. We've pretty extensively covered Dowell Loggins so far on the show.
And I'm not sure.
Like I said,
I'm not sure I completely am out on the Loggins experiment. I understand, like, if the fan base is frustrated, and rightfully so, at the way the offense looked yesterday. We'll give it a few more weeks. So I'm not saying I won't be completely on that side eventually. I mean, we had questions when he was hired as far as his previous record or whatever. We'd liked to think that he had learned some things at Arkansas that would work out here. In year one, I thought he did an amicable job, especially when you consider the offensive line that he was given. But I don't know. At some point, the excuses will have to stop. So we'll see what happens going forward. And speaking of going forward, do you want to talk about Kentucky a little bit before we get out of here?
Yeah, because that's coming next and going to need to look a lot better than yesterday.
Yeah, so Kentucky yesterday, if you missed it, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, because they had quite a lengthy lightning delay before the game ultimately got called early. But they win 30 or 31, I don't have the score, 31-0 over Southern Miss in about 2.5 quarters. They were able to put that up before the lightning delay stopped the game. Did you watch any of that one? Any takeaways from that other than, they were certainly better than Southern Miss by a wide margin?
A tiny bit of it when I got home from Willie B before they called it. It was like the end of the second quarter and how much of the third quarter they got in before the weather stopped it. Nothing crazy. I mean, you kind of just confirmed some priors with Kentucky against a team that went 3-9 in the Sun Belt last year. Deion Walker is still really good. Barry Brown is still really fast. They look like a very typical Kentucky team. D-line's kind of big and smashy. They got some guys in space, but they're still going to – I thought Brock Vandegrift looked fine, but it's Southern Miss, and they weren't asking him to do a whole lot. I don't know. They played 35 minutes of football against a 3-9 Sun Belt team and just looked competent, and that's about all I took from it.
Yeah, on Vandegrift, he was efficient, but he wasn't throwing the ball down the field very much. He went 12 for 18, 170 yards, so averaged a little less than 10 yards a pass or completion, I guess. He did throw 3 touchdowns. Pretty much all of them were little dump offs that the wide receiver took care of the rest and all of that. But yeah, I mean, they didn't make a ton of mistakes. They played good defense. And if they do that next week, South Carolina is going to have some trouble compared to, I mean, if they played like they did this past week.
Pretty typical Mark Stoops team was kind of just what I took from that. They look like Kentucky. They're probably going to win 7 or 8 games. And if you're South Carolina, you got to find a way to make sure one of those isn't next week. And what is the early prognosis on that? How would you, I guess maybe between now and Saturday, 6 days, what do you need to, you can't see anything, but what do you think you need to see in a hypothetical world where you could watch practice and knew what was going on in the building every moment? What needs to happen between now and Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, those shoot yourself in the foot moments that Beamer talked about, that's got to go away. I don't think that there's a scenario where you where you go to Lexington and the offense is suddenly, firing on all cylinders and you look great. I mean, we heard throughout the preseason that the offense was struggling with South Carolina's defense. So it sounds like this has been an ongoing thing for a while now. So I don't expect a 180. You got to protect the football. You got to put Lenora Sellers into a better rhythm early, passing the ball. your defense has to show up the same way that it did this week, which I think that part is very possible. And somehow you're going to have to give Sellers some time with that salty Kentucky front, and the offensive line. Yeah, I mean, what fixes can you make on the offensive line in 6 days? I don't know. Do you have an answer for that? I don't know that they've had an answer for that for 2 seasons now.
I will say the one, it definitely doesn't fix everything, and it's a little bit harsh to throw it on one person, and he definitely wasn't terrible or anything. He did have the penalty. I was a little surprised he saw none of Trovon Ball yesterday, other than, like, I think he was blocking on the extra point in the field goal team. That's an all SEC freshman right guard last year, and you were kind of struggling to block on the interior at some points yesterday. I don't think Trovon Ball plays and you run the ball for 200 yards yesterday. I don't think that happens, but I don't know. That was one thought I had, but you just got to hope that week 1 to week 2 jump coaches always talk about is there. And like I said, I think a lot of this goes on Dowell Loggins now of how do you fix it? How do you put your quarterback in a better position? And how do you kind of keep some drives going? Because I think we can all agree that forcing 2 turnovers inside the 10-yard line is probably not a sustainable way to play every week.
Yeah, on the offensive line, admittedly, I need to go back and watch the tape again a little closer on what exactly went wrong there. I mean, there's some moments that stand out. I know in particular, I saw Case and Henry crash down when there was an outside blitz and just let the guy free release to Lenore Sellers at one point. Like I said, there were a couple twists that seemed to throw off the interior of the line, and then immediately had pressure up the middle. So yeah, I don't know if there's like a couple people to blame that maybe you want to shuffle in a couple other guys and see what they have, like Ball, like you mentioned, or maybe try Tree at right tackle if Henry was consistently a problem. Again, I can only think of that one play right now. Yeah, I don't know if it's a personnel fix or if it's just a mindset fix or what. Speaking of, I guess, like people that we've given a pass, at what point does Teasley start to take any blame for the way the offensive line has been playing? I mean, he's a great recruiter. We've brought in some really talented guys on paper. They're still young. How much of it's to blame for
not
the,
after week 1, but I get where you're going with it.
Yeah.
I think you got to see more than 60 minutes of football. But yeah, I won't argue with that if this continues.
You still have Sean Elliott on staff too. We thought that he might have some input in the run game and in the blocking scheme and all those sorts of things. Did he? Does he not? Should he? Definitely some things, I guess, that we don't have all the inside information on because it's going on behind closed doors and stuff that I don't know. Maybe there's some solutions in-house that need to be at least thought about.
Yeah, and I think it's going to have to because, I mean, we've talked about it all offseason. We know what's coming. It's Kentucky and LSU within the next 13 days, and I think we're both in agreement. You got to find a way to win one of those 2 games, or this could get south pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we'll see LSU later tonight. Kind of have an idea of what they're bringing to Williams-Brice Stadium. At what point is that the more likely one because you're at least playing at home? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Lenore Sellers is different than every other freshman that I've ever seen, and he's going to play better on the road than he did at home. We'll have a lot more on Kentucky throughout the week on GamecockScoop.com, and we will ask some folks over at the Kentucky side on Rivals to give us a little bit of inside info on what's been going on over there too. Hope to have a little segment on the podcast with someone over there too. So look out for all of that. In the meantime, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you later.